Alrighty. Make sure I'm off mute. Welcome to the Modesto City Schools 1449th regular board meeting of August 17th, 2020. I'd like to remind everyone to please mute your phones and refrain from typing comments in Teams. This meeting is now called to order. In closed session, the board gave direction to legal counsel. I'm now going to do the roll call. Trustee, let's start with student rep Carson Carranza. Carson, are you here?
Yes, I am present.
Carson, welcome to your first official board meeting.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Trustee Brown. Trustee Irvin.
Present.
Trustee Lopez.
Present.
President Marks.
Present.
Thank you. Trustee Newman is not able to be here with us tonight. Trustee Walker.
Here.
And myself. As for translator services, I'd like to refer anybody who needs translator services to Miss Paula Valbuena, who is on this virtual conference. Miss Valbuena, please go ahead.
Thank you. Buenas tardes. Habla Paula Valbuena. Si necesita servicios de interpretación al español, por favor llame al 1805-324-7680 e ingrese el código de acceso 257-482-774 seguido de la tecla numeral. Este es un número totalmente gratis. Nuevamente, llame al número de teléfono 1805-324-7680 e ingrese el código de acceso 257-482-774 seguido de la tecla numeral. También puede acceder a estas instrucciones en nuestro sitio web en mcs4kids.com dirigiéndose a la parte inferior de la página en Quick Links y haciendo clic en Board Agendas para ir a la agenda de hoy. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Valbuena. I would like everyone to please join me for a moment of silence. Thank you. And now please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. This open session meeting of the Board of Trustees is being live streamed at the direction of the board. The live stream is available on the district website, and the recordings will be available for viewing the day after the board meeting. Modesto City School Board meetings are closed to the public to follow state guidelines on social distancing until further notice. This action was taken in response to the Governor's Executive Order N-2520 and Resolution 1920-17, delegating authority to take necessary action to protect students and staff from the spread of coronavirus, also known as COVID-19, adopted by Modesto City Schools on March 18, 2020. Regarding public comment, Modesto City Schools has provided an opportunity for the public to provide comment. It is outlined on the agenda. The public has been given an opportunity to call in and leave a voicemail or send us a comment via an email address. This practice will continue throughout the time we are conducting virtual meetings. For members of the public that are interested in commenting in the future, we welcome your comments. Superintendent Noguchi?
Wonderful, thank you. Good evening.
There we go. Thank you. And good evening. I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight and thank the board members who are here and present. Participation tonight is going to look a little different. We do have some board members that are in the room here tonight, 6 feet apart and with our face coverings. We also have President Marks who has called in, and Trustee Newman is not able to be present today. Cabinet members are on Teams tonight, so they are here in the boardroom. They're here in the board meeting, but not in the boardroom. We really are working to ensure that we have the least amount of people in the room to ensure that we're mitigating the spread of COVID-19. And there's President Marks. Welcome. Tonight you are going to hear a report on the first week of school. While the opening was not what we planned for, we are doing our best and remain focused on providing the best education for our students. We are currently working on multiple avenues relative to opening schools, our computer network, teacher staffing, connectivity, substitutes, facilities, you name it. We're working on a lot of different avenues. However, we recognize that we need to get the 35,000 computers up and running. And we say 35,000 because we've got almost 30,000 students, but we have 5,000 staff. So really putting that all together, all coming together in our network is a heavy lift, but I'm confident that we are moving forward, and you will hear tonight how closely we are at getting 100% of our students online. Rest assured that while it is going to take a little bit of time, I am confident that our technology systems will support all of the distance learning content and strategies. Our CIPD, Curriculum Instruction and Professional Development team, has worked on and has developed over the summer. It's just going to take us just a little bit of time. At the end of the day, like you and many people that we've heard from throughout the week, we all want to reopen our schools. I want to see kids not in front of their screens. I've seen many kids in front of their screens as I was walking through classrooms, but I want to see them in the classroom with the teachers interacting with the students. How do we get there? How can we manage to get our brick and mortar? How can we get our kids back? You know, the governor has outlined a real clear criteria that must be in place for us to be able to get our kids back in school. One, we need to have hospital beds available. At this point, we have less than 6% available in our ICUs. We have to be off the state monitoring list for 2 full weeks. So for 14 days, we're below 8% positivity rate. And the last one, which I'm going to talk a little bit about, we need to have our infections be 200 to every 100,000 that we have. So we can't be over 200. As of yesterday, we had 594 positive cases. That's nearly, with the exception of 6, 3 times the amount that we need. So if we talk about really our want and our desire for getting our kids back in school and our teachers back in front of them, we need to do this together. We need to, as a community, wear our masks as evidenced by the board here. We need to remain 6 feet apart as evidenced by what we're doing tonight, and also continue to wash our hands when we go out. I recognize that this is really hard. It's hard for me to stay away from my family. It's hard for me to stay away from my friends, but we have to be able to control the spread. And certainly I give my commitment to you that I'm doing everything I can to ensure that I don't get this infection, as I don't want to spread it to cabinet and others. What I do know, and I'll bring it to a close, what I do know is counties in this state have been able to get off the list. Last time I talked to you, I talked about the state as a whole. I gave the example of New York being off any sort of list. They're less than 1% positivity rate. San Diego yesterday just met the criteria for getting off the governor's watch list. If they can meet the criteria, I am confident that Stanislaus County can meet this criteria, but we have to do this together. I would like to see Stanislaus be the example in the Central Valley, and I think that we can do it, again, if we work together to mitigate the positive spread. Lastly, I do recognize that I can learn a lot from the community, from our staff, and from our parents, and from our students. I'm always available to listen and to learn from you on what support you need to be successful at home with your child, or students to be systems that you need in place to be successful. I will be hosting a community forum this Wednesday from 5:30 to 6:30, and you can take a look at the website for that link. The challenge that I have provided staff is to take a look at the number of participants at our last community forum and increase that by 20%. So I'd like to see 20% more than what we had at our last community meeting, because I really do believe it's important to hear from the community on what they need. So with that, and with my very shiny shield here, I'm going to turn it over to Vice President West. You're muted.
Thank you, Dr. Noguchi. It's difficult. We're sitting right next to each other, so we can hear each other, but there's a lag time. So I try to mute so that you guys don't have an echo. What I'd like to do now is move on to the Board of Education members' reports. So we're going to just go down the line. President Marks, do you have anything to report?
Okay, believing I'm unmuted. All right, it worked the first time. That's great. So I just had a few things to report. I have attended 2 CSBA meetings with the delegates and board members from around 6 counties, and we've had updates and reports from the state and just kind of helping us understand how we could start school and what the issues might be that we might encounter. So all different things, just like scenarios as we have. So some started August 3rd and some are starting next week. Some are moved their start date to after Labor Day. So those were some of the reports from the board members. Also attended the CalSSD, the California Large Suburban District, and they gave us some updates, I believe, on special ed and some of the things that we might work towards to help our students in greater capacity, and just to be ready for how we can work with our families to be able to support them. And then I also attended the budget meeting, the Budget Advisory Committee meeting with, I believe, Trustee Lopez was there as well. I just didn't see you, but I saw your logos on there. So I appreciated being able to be part of that again, and just working on how we're going to ensure that we can provide all the services that we need for our students, the programs, and then meet all the needs of our staff members and our administration. So we just, it's a great committee. I thank the union members for being on that, both classified and the teachers union, the MTA. So I appreciate that the certificated are on there as well. It gives a good dialogue, and we had a really good discussion this last meeting. So I appreciate that. And then lastly, I wanted to report that I went to or attended on Zoom the Dr. Parker, the Parents Leading Change meeting, and we are planning September 11th to have a town hall meeting for the parents, a parents town hall meeting. Jocelyn Cooper is the president of that committee, and the plan is to have speakers on IEP, the curriculum, COVID, and social emotional impacts for our students. And then there will be a person that will be overseeing all of that. Each one will have a specific speaker. So that's our plan for September 11th. I believe it's at 5:30 in the evening until 7 o'clock. So I'm looking forward to seeing how we can communicate better with our parents and hear some of their struggles, but also answer some of their questions. So that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, President Marks. Trustee Walker?
Nothing from me.
Thank you. Trustee Brown? I think you're mute.
There we go, finally. So I did attend the Stanislaus County School Boards Association meeting this past week, and heard what each of the districts are going through. Nothing really alarming or new to report out of that meeting.
Thank you, Trustee Brown. Trustee Irvin?
Yes, I got a chance to attend and volunteer at the Stanislaus County Foster Parents Association drive-by backpack and school supplies giveaway. Actually helped them to get 250 backpacks full with school supplies, and also provided a lunch, bag lunch, to and met a lot of our foster parents, foster children in our district as well. Really good event. Like I said, it was out in series at the Foster Parents Association headquarters, and they drove through in the parking lot and handed them a backpack and sack lunch, and it was great being able to provide those backpacks to those foster children. That's it.
Thank you. Trustee Lopez?
Hi, everyone. I just want to report out that September 10th, there will be the Save Routes to School meeting at Marshall. As we, in the next board meeting, I'll give more times at the time and how to access if folks want to do that. I was a part of the budget committee as well, and I was always gonna like always bringing up to wear your mask. Now you're seeing us wear it because we're in separated but in the same room. And I think Dr. Noguchi did a great, the reasons why we need to wear that. It's important that we keep ourselves healthy, not only to get back to school, but because we want our families together, right? We want our families together, and we want them to be healthy while we're sharing the meal. So it's important that we follow those norms, because in the end run, it means that everyone's going to be at the table together. I want to give a quick shout out to Modesto High School's class of 2010, which is celebrating their 10-year and 10-year was supposed to celebrate their 10-year reunion this Saturday, but due to COVID, we didn't get to have that opportunity. So as a fellow 2010 class alum, I want to say hi to all my peers, and hopefully next year we can meet on our 11th high school reunion.
Thank you, Trustee Lopez. I want to report that I attended virtually the meeting at the beginning of the school year with Dr. Noguchi, talking about kind of rolling out how the school year was going to look. This was the week before school actually started. One thing that I really appreciated was hearing all of the positive things that we accomplished last year. I think at the end of the year, we were just stopped and went into crisis mode, and it was a scramble. And I think we really forget all the hard work that was done for the first 2/3 of the school year, or 3/4, or whatever it was. And we really did some awesome things last year. And so I think it's easy to get discouraged these days, but I think it's important to focus on the hard work that was done and the success that we did have, and to know that we're going to get there again. It's just we've got a little blip in the road right now, but we will reach that again. After Dr. Noguchi's talk, we were able to hear from Dr. Dome. She gave a wonderful presentation on diversity and talked about all the different ways that we can help our students, all of our students across the board. I thought she did a wonderful job. I took some notes. There were some great ideas. I actually ordered one of the books and just received it today, one of the books she talked about. So I'm excited to start reading that. And I'm looking forward to making Modesto City Schools a great place for every single one of our students. So we're going to move on now to A7, and this is the approval of the consent agenda. Ms. Noonan, are there any comments from the public on the consent agenda?
No, there are not.
It has been requested that we pull C1 from the consent agenda. The staff has requested this. It's going to come up in a future meeting. So C1 will be pulled. And so now I'm looking to hear a motion to approve the consent agenda. I see Trustee Brown. Do I hear a second? Trustee Lopez. I have Trustee Lopez. And so we're going to take a roll call since we don't have everybody. Well, President Marks is in the room, but I think we'll just do roll call. We'll start with the student representative is on this one. Is that correct, Dr. Noguchi? So student rep Carson. We're looking for all in favor. We're looking for you raising your hand and saying aye or nay.
Aye.
Thank you. Trustee Brown?
Aye.
Trustee Irvin?
Aye.
Trustee Lopez?
Aye.
President Marks?
Aye.
Trustee Walker?
Aye.
And Vice President West is aye as well. Okay, so we're looking MA8 will be the approval of the order of the discussion action items. So again, we're looking for a motion to approve the order of the discussion items.
So moved.
Trustee Walker, and a second.
I'll second.
Trustee Lopez. And so we're going to do a roll call again. Student Rep Carranza.
Aye.
Thank you. Trustee Brown.
Aye.
Trustee Irvin.
Aye.
Trustee Lopez.
Aye.
President Marks.
She looks frozen.
Oh, you do look frozen. Your picture's frozen. Can we hear you? We'll come back to President Marks. Trustee Walker.
Aye.
President,
could you
Vice
hear me?
President. Now we can hear you. Is
Thank
yours
you.
an aye?
Yes.
Thank you. And I am an aye as well. Thank you so much. We'll move on now to A9, which is the period for public comment or presentation. Ms. Noonan, are there any comments from the public?
No, not receive any public comment for this meeting.
Okay, thank you so much. Moving on now to B1, we're going to start with the student representative report. Do you have something to report?
Yes.
Awesome. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Since school has started, the high school leadership programs in our district have been doing their best to stay engaged with students as we move forward in online learning. These programs have been busy on social media answering questions and making sure students receive the latest updates regarding class schedules and their devices. Over the summer, I had the opportunity to meet with Dr. Noguchi a few times to discuss plans for this school year addressing possible inequities that may be present in our district from a student's perspective. We also discussed how specific curriculum centered around history from different viewpoints in MCS can help increase unity and address implicit bias. This year, Inter-High Council will be meeting in Microsoft Teams to stay engaged while we are in online learning. I was able to meet with Ms. Hinkle this afternoon, and we both agree that it's important to expand the opportunity to get involved in the Inter-High Council to students outside of high school leadership. As a leadership student myself, I recognize that leadership students have a completely different perspective from the majority of the student body. It is crucial we improve student representation at these Inter-High meetings so all students in our district can feel their voices heard and that they are being represented. I plan to invite students from several groups on high school campuses such as AVID, FFA, and theater, and many more to expand Inter-High Council's reach to achieve further insight into students' experiences. Thank you. That's all I have for today.
I think that's wonderful. I'm so happy to hear that you're going to look at viewpoints from all the different groups of students on campus. Thank you so much for that report. B2, we're going to hear a report now on English Learner Master Plan and approval of reclassification of fluent English proficient student criteria. Dr. Adele, we would like to have you take this one. Are you ready?
I am. Ms. Moda, would you go ahead and get the presentation ready while I introduce us? You can go ahead
You're
and take over
muted,
the
Dr.
screen.
Adele. Oh, you heard?
I am muted.
Okay.
No. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Thank you. Good evening, President Marks, Trustee, and Superintendent Dr. Noguchi. What you're going to see tonight, I'm very, very excited to share with you. It's a culmination of last year's work this past year with our tremendous team. You recognize the need for additional attention and our focus for English learners, the 36% of our population that is an English learner. And in the reorganization of the spring, you supported this realignment of our resources to better support all of our English learners. So we want to thank you for your foresight and understanding for this need. And we're going to be talking to you from everything from Dual Language Academy, our federal program monitoring adjustments that were made, Language Institute, our instructional coaches, our curriculum changes for designated and integrated courses. All kinds of things are going to come up. And then, of course, we're going to ask you to consider to approve our redesignation criteria for this year that you will do every year. And at this time, I just again want to thank you for your support as we've moved through some significant changes with English learners and how we best support them. And I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Moda now.
Good evening, President Marks, trustees, Superintendent Dr. Noguchi, Cabinet, and other guests. So today's presentation is about English learners and their English Learner Master Plan. So our purpose for today is to provide current English learner data, recommend the approval of the 2021 RFAP criteria, and also to report on the English Learner Master Plan. So this slide contains some acronyms and terms that will be used throughout the presentation. I would like to point out some. In particular, DLAC, District English Learner Advisory Group, as well as ELAC, the English Learner Advisory Committee, which is at the site base. Also, the ELMP, which I will use a lot, is the acronyms for the English Learner Master Plan, and FPM is Federal Program Monitoring. To start, we're going to look at some of our English learner data. And Dr. Odell already stated that we have a roughly 36% of our of our MCS students that are English learners. So I'm going to break that down for you. Just as a reminder, when a student first enrolls in a California school, they fill out a home language survey. Based on that home language survey, they are categorized as either English only or TBD. A TBD student is if they answer the first 3 questions in that home language survey were other than English. So if you can see on the presentation, currently we have 585. It actually has increased since I created the presentation. So we have a lot of Kinder TK students that are considered TBD. Not only are they Kinder and TK students, but also we have some students that we were not able to assess last year due to COVID, so they are also on this list. That's why the 9, 12, and 7, 8 seem pretty high. To continue, looking at the chart, there are currently about 6,000 EL students that we are responsible for providing integrated and designated services, as well as assess yearly on the summative LPAC. In addition to being responsible for those English learners, our department also oversees students that have been reclassified within the last 4 years. Currently, we oversee about 3,700 students that have been reclassified in the last 4 years. This brings us to a total of 10,358 students that we oversee here in our department. To break down that data a little further, we're going to look at some of our English learners. As stated previously, we have around 6,600 EL students, but we have 230 that are considered newcomers, which are less than a year in a U.S. school. And we also have around 2,300 students that are considered long-term English learners. So out of all our English learners, there's 4% that are newcomers and there's 35% that are long-term English learners. So we are responsible for a lot of students here at Modesto City Schools that are EL or RFEP. So our next steps for our department is to assess our TBD students with our initial LPAC. We actually began testing or training our testers for our initial testing today. So we're starting that already. We also need to finish assessing students with the optional summative LPAC. And I'll explain that a little further in our slides, what that means, what that is. We also have to provide supports for English learners, even via distance learning. So we have a lot of English learners currently enrolled in MBA. So we are creating designated ELD supports for that program for K-12 students. So our team is working hard on doing that. We also are working to provide professional development for our designated supports, particularly with our designated curriculum of Wonder, Study, Sync, and Edge. We are also working on continuing to provide supports and deepen our understanding of integrated ELD, for all of our teachers. So we have the knowledge, but we want to deepen that knowledge for all teachers. Additionally, we are also working for our LI students on providing supports for our new curriculum, which is Everyday English Plus, and continuing the supports for System 44. Once we are working on that, we're also going to start working on RFEP being our students and also working on monitoring the ones that are within the 4 years. So that was some of our data. So now I want to come and present on the proposed RFEP criteria. So as a reminder, there are 4 criteria an English learner must meet in order to be reclassified. And I know I presented on this last year. The first one is language proficiency assessment of an LPAC of 4. This is a statewide criteria. So any student need to have an LPAC of 4. That is not a local decision. It is the decision by the state. Then we have a standardized assessment, a teacher evaluation of student progress, and then the parent consultation. Due to COVID, we were not able to finish our assessing all of our English learners within for the summative LPAC. So that put a little damper on our plan, but the state did provide some guidance. So the guidance that was provided with the state is that in order to reclassify a student, they must still have an LPAC score of 4 using the 2019-2020 LPAC scores. So we did receive some of the scores, but we didn't finish assessing all the students. So what that means for our district is we could participate in the optional summative LPAC. So the optional summative LPAC is to finish assessing any students that we did not complete in the spring. So the way we're going to work on this is any students that meet the other 3 criteria, they're going to go on the list, and then we're going to work on assessing those students in order for them to be reclassified. We also for the standardized assessment, one of the criteria that we have is the CASP. We did not assess the CASP. The state did give us guidelines on this as well. They said we may use the 18-19 CASP in order to reclassify students, or we may use local criteria for that decision. Those are the 2 guidelines that the state gave. 3 and 4 remain unaffected. So what does that mean for us? Well, we have no choice for LPAC of 4. It's still a 4. So you see highlighted there in blue the standardized assessment. I come to you to propose a new criteria for this school year due to COVID and also due to FPM. So it's minor changes, but we did have to adjust some of the criteria. So for K3, we're still going to use DIBELS, but because we were not able to assess end of year, we will be using middle of year cutoff scores. For 4th grade, last year we used CASP. So our current 4th graders were 3rd graders last year. They did not take the CASP. So the test that we want to use for them is the DIBELS assessment that they did take, again, middle of year. For 5th through 9th graders, we actually made no change here. We analyzed the data using a local assessment and using CASP, and more students met the criteria under CASP than they did the local assessment, so made a decision not to change that criteria. For 10th to 12th graders, we had the SRI and CASP test. We have changed this to be the Study Sync benchmark. The change of SRI was not due to COVID. It was actually due to FPM. So we were going to get a finding in that criteria, but I had to make a plan and say that we weren't going to use the SRI anymore because it didn't meet the standards. So therefore, the only other assessment we have currently is a Study Sync benchmark. Now moving on to the English Learner Master Plan. So last year we worked on updating our English Learner Master Plan. Modesto City Schools already had a plan, but it was pretty outdated. So I'm going to go over the 4 criteria: legal requirements, our members, our meetings, and then are also some important sections in the ELMP.
Now, I want to add, when Metacella says it was outdated, it was from 2013, so it was quite outdated. And we typically, I've only ever seen 5-year plans. Anybody who has one longer than that definitely updates it. So it was time for us.
Yes. Although there's no specific legal requirement that says we have to have an English Learner Master Plan, there are legal requirements like how do we identify English learners that should be stated to parents. Most districts create an English Learner Master Plan because it houses all the information in one document, and that's what we did too. I added 2 samples that are in our English Learner Master Plan. One is the EL identification of policies and procedures. So again, how does a student become an English learner in the first place? And then the language acquisition program options. So what do we offer here for English learners? So this was a committee that we formed at the beginning of the last school year. And these are the members that we invited to participate. So we had some district personnel, some teachers, some site admin, and some DLAC and ELAC parents representatives that were part of our English Learner Master Plan committee. We also invited a community member, but he was unable to make it. So we had our first meeting back on October 2nd of last year, and that was our orientation meeting. What we did during that meeting was we actually looked at the old English Learner Master Plan and decided what's old, what's outdated, what do we need to still have in the English Learner Master Plan. So it was just a starting point for us. Then we had our next meeting on October 21st, and the way that meetings were set up was where we really valued the input of our members. So they took the time after the English Learner Master Plan sections were created to give feedback. So they worked with different groups of mixture of parents, teachers, admin, and district personnel. They were always mixed so that we can get feedback from them. Then I would take that feedback and make adjustments. So we did that for sections 2, 5, 3, 4, and 1, 6. And during our last meeting, we looked at the whole document, the document as a whole. Oops. So some of the sections that are included in our English Learner Master Plan are introduction, instructional programs, reclassification, and parent advisory committee. So some of the highlights in the introduction, we have our vision, mission, and values. For section 2, it's a very important information for parents. A lot of parents always ask, how is my student even an English learner? This part of the English Learner Master Plan identifies that. It talks about the initial identification process and also about the LPAC. Section 3 covers structured English immersion, language institute, and dual language academy. In section 4, the ELD standards are covered. Section 5, we discuss reclassification monitoring, and also state seal of biliteracy, because English learners do have an additional criteria that they have to meet in order to receive the state seal of biliteracy. And the last section covers DLAC and ELAC. So I am here to recommend and have your approval for the RFIP criteria for 2021 school year. Any questions? I'm going to stop sharing so I can see you guys.
Thank you very much for that report. I'm going to start with Ms. Noonan to see if we have any comments from the public on this.
No, we do not on this item.
All right, thank you. We'll then move to the board to see if we have any questions or comments from board members. So I'm looking for hands raised or Trustee Brown.
Yes, I saw that there was, instead of an end of the year assessment, that we're moving to a mid-year assessment. Will that mid-year assessment address only students who were not able to finish the assessment last year, or will it also give an opportunity for newly identified students to receive an assessment for early completion?
Yes, we did not complete the end of year for any students, so we will be using the middle of year. Usually for any incoming students, we always use from this year. So if they come from another district and that district didn't have DIBELS, but here we assess them for a beginning of year, we use the same type of criteria and then use that at the end of semester one.
So will we be assessing again at the end of the year for students who are identified as new English learners?
For DIBELS?
Well, it sounds like we're catching up from last year, but how do we deal with this year?
Oh yes, we're still catching up from last year, but we use all the scores since LPAC changed. We use all the scores from the previous year to reclassify for this year. So even the,
Does that answer your question, Trustee Brown?
Yes.
Thank you.
And
Trustee,
once the student, I'm sorry, Dr. West, once the student is redesignated, or we use the acronym RFECT, we never test them again for that. So it's a one-time test that we do. We don't reassess them for that later.
okay, thank you. Trustee Irvin?
Yes, I wanted to know how is the EL curriculum working now that it's gone virtual? Has there been any issues or anything that has hindered access or anything like that for our students?
I'm pretty sure that with distant learning, we're all have roadblocks in the way, but any roadblocks that we have, we're trying to overcome. We actually are working on creating a new program, not new because we have it at Ptolemy for our English learners that are newcomers, but we're also working on, hey, it's distance learning. It also provides opportunities for us to reach some of the students that we weren't able to reach in a different manner. So there's always roadblocks and we're always working to help the students.
Okay, so there's nothing that's gonna like set them back anything, you know, make them set back one step or anything like that. It's still on pace.
We hope not, and if they are, we will ensure that we have a plan to catch them up.
Okay, thank you.
I would say that the English learners are not experiencing any more technical difficulties than any other students, and the curriculum is solid. We've got 3 coaches, English learner coaches that are focused solely on that curriculum and those students. So they're not experiencing anything differently than the other hiccups that we've had in the first week.
It's good to hear. Trustee Lopez?
Yeah, my question.
I think you're muted.
Sorry, behind my mask, I'm laughing at myself. But my question was around, I heard mentioned DLAC and ELAC, and I remember that a couple months ago, Ms. Moda, you were talking about the revitalization of, if I'm not mistaken, DLAC, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, do we have any updates and how, again, kind of towards what Trustee Brown mentioned, how that's going to work in the distance learning environment, and maybe it might be easier to get parents in the table, but is there any progress on that end of how we're reshaping our DLAC?
Yeah, we've actually hosted 2 DLAC meetings already, virtually both. The first one went okay. So we invited all our DLAC representatives last year. We always call them, we emailed them, and we got some feedback from them as well. I personally called every single one of them to ensure how we could make it better. And one of the feedbacks that the DLAC parents gave us is if we could provide the PDFs to them the night before, that way if they were calling from the phone, that they would have access to seeing it through. So we did that for our second meeting and it went a lot smoother. We also have our training for ELAC coming up this Thursday.
Great, awesome. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
That's great. Trustee Walker?
Okay, so I had to unmute there. My first question is, I saw a name that I'm not used to seeing here. I thought we used Study Sync at 912, but I see Edge. What is Edge?
Edges are designated ELD curriculum. So they use Study Sync for ELA, but for the designated portion, they use Edge.
But at the same time, we're not using SBAC, we're using a Study Sync benchmark. So I'm trying to connect dots here. I've got a curriculum called Edge, but a benchmark called Study Sync.
So students in ELA in 912, they all take Study Sync, or they use Study Sync. For the designated piece of 912, they use Edge. So two different curriculums for two different classes, essentially.
And I would add to that, the assessment is on their English language arts skill set, not necessarily ELD. So we don't give an ELD test for redesignation. It has to be an ELA test. So that's why it's the Study Sync or the task portion.
Okay, and then the second part of that would be, I've had others tell me in the past, Dibbles isn't all that big a deal, in the sense that I've had parents or past educators say, why would you use it? It's very short, very quick, in and out, done. When comparison to an SBAC, how are we, I mean, does that at least make sense? I've never taken it, so I wouldn't know.
FPM saw all our assessments and they said it would be fine, since the grades for K1, 2, 3 are completely different than the older grades. How they assess is different. So we actually didn't have a finding in that, so we were okay. I haven't taken it myself either, but I believe the rigor is there.
And then I guess the follow-up would be, at the end of the day, once we get folks back, we're going to morph back to what the original plan was, right?
Yeah.
This is sort of this is what we need to do this year, because this year is funky, goofy, and that the real plan going forward is, once we get back to normal operations and regular order, everything will flip back to what we originally talked about last year. Does
that is the plan. Hopefully everything goes back to normal as soon as possible. This is our temporary solution. Thank you.
Thank you. President Marks, do you have any questions or comments?
I do not. Am I good? Oh, you can hear me. Okay.
We can hear you.
I do not. You can. Okay. I appreciate all that you put together to make this happen. This is exciting. And I know it's challenging right now for everyone, but it looks like you've made a great progress in where we're headed. And so I look forward to it. And I'm glad we have coaches. I think that's critical for those students to make progress with their English skills. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Seeing no more hands, I have one comment and one question. My comment is on the ELMP. I was really pleased to hear that we solicited feedback from parents, teachers, and community members to help guide us in this decision-making process. So I'm glad to hear that we're getting input from all the different groups on that. My question is, you talked about MVA and you said we have a lot of EL students who are enrolled in that program. Do you have an approximate number of students or percentage of students who actually chose to go MVA this year?
I do not. I saw the initial list, so then there's been a lot of steps that have been taken from them. But in the initial list of students that wanted to do it, I saw that there was K-12 students. So we just started creating curriculum for them for MBA. If there's one, we will create the curriculum for them.
Okay, awesome. And I'm glad to hear that we do as well have coaches that can help those students along. So thank you so much.
Dr. West, this is Brad Godot. I would be happy to prepare some more information for the board this week around the MVA. We're going to talk a little bit about MVA expansion in our back to school presentation, but I can get more specifics to the EL enrollment and the MVA at the end of this week.
That would be wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Godot. All right, seeing no more hands, I'm looking for a motion for approval of the reclassification criteria. Do I have a motion? Trustee Lopez, and I'm looking for a second on this.
I'll second. Cindy Marks, second.
That's President Marks, thank you so much. And I'm going to do a roll call for this. Trustee Lopez.
Aye.
Trustee Brown.
Aye.
Trustee Irvin.
Aye.
President Marks.
Aye.
Trustee Walker.
Aye.
Student Rep Carranza.
Aye.
Thank you. And it is an aye from me as well. So that passes. Thank you so much. We're on to B3, and we're looking at a report on the first day of the 2020-2021 school year. I believe this is you, Mr. Godot.
There we go. Yes, it is, Dr. West. Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here this evening in conjunction with Cabinet to present our first day of school report. Let me share my screen here. There we go. Okay. So the purpose of this evening's presentation is to outline the work that was done to open schools, as well as report about the facts and details about the first day of school, as well as the first week. Our very own Kristen Noonan will also be sharing our parent and community voice and resources, as well as sharing our next steps as to how we're moving forward. The district goal alignment here is really how do we prepare for this first week of school and the opening schools. As always, we want to prepare a safe and welcoming, respectful learning environment, promoting our outstanding students, families, staff, programs, school, and community partners, as well as customer service. And as I think we go through the presentation, we'll see that customer service is at the top of our list right now. This is a team effort presentation this evening. You're going to hear from each of the divisions in this order here, and without any hesitation, we're going to move it forward. And I'd like to introduce Associate Superintendent Mike Henderson.
All right, good afternoon. Thank you, Associate Superintendent Godot, and good evening, trustees. 2 human resources slides. This is the time of year we do a quick update of our numbers of employees. So 4,820 total employees, and you see the breakdown by employee group. A little inflated in that number with certificated and classified substitutes. It's usually about September when things settle in, and we look at some subs that are in the system by name but may not be active, and we purge the list a little bit. But we really did a lot of aggressive hiring of subs, so it's no surprise to me that those numbers are high. This just may be a little high. New hire numbers for July 1 forward for the 2021 school year. You see the breakdown there. We did implement a hiring freeze in the spring as we went through the school closure period. So these numbers are pretty noticeably lower than normal. Some data points for our department. You've been briefed in the past on Inform K-12, the online routing program that we're using to go paperless or less paper-driven in HR. And since the onset of the pandemic and school closures, we've implemented 24 new forms to the electronic routing. It's really positively impacted our workflow and streamlined our processes, particularly in this difficult time. We've continued with positive collaboration with both CSEA, developing a memorandum of understanding for the beginning of the year, the return to school as we know it now, and then letter of agreement with Modesto Teachers Association. Really have spent a lot of time with them to create the conditions so that the expectations are clear about how employees, the work environment is going to be for them in this distance learning under these conditions. As part of that, we did come to agreement on worksite flexibility due to childcare. We have the high-risk group that medically need to have the opportunity to work remotely so as to decrease their potential exposure to COVID. But you see some data here on the worksite flexibility. Number of approved requests were certificated, and that almost 30%. These numbers have probably ticked up since we put them on the slide. About 30% of certificated, almost 10% of classified employees for the child care provision. And we've continued our usual annual training. The big challenge has been changing that and doing a lot of thinking around how do we do that. Normally we bring people together. How do we do all of our training now virtually? And the teams that have put these trainings together for our certificated, our management and substitute staff have done a great job, and they've been achieved the means of getting the information to those employees, but also done so in a remote fashion. It's been, I think, very, very professionally driven. And now I'll introduce Associate Superintendent, Business Services and Chief Business Official, Tim Zerley, to discuss Business Services Division.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. Good evening, trustees. I just want to clarify that this is a 2019 photo of Business Services leadership. That is why we are not socially distanced nor wearing masks. First slide is for maintenance and operations, one of the departments under my division. And you can see here we've completed 44 summer projects at 28 of our school sites at a cost of about just exceeding $10 million. Last year, we did a summer virtual tour to drive the trustees and other members around the district to look at the projects. Obviously, we can't do that this year, but we are working on a virtual summer project tour that will be presented to you at an upcoming board meeting. This is just a picture on the left is prior to bond measures D&E passing. Pretty much the same picture on the right. So you can see in the background, that would be Kirsten Elementary and the wall of portable classrooms. And then you can see the playground structure there at Robb Road prior to measures D&E, and then new asphalt paving, new playground structure, and the new paint in the background at Kirsten Elementary. Great example of what our bond dollars can do for us. Next up is nutrition services. Much different this year than prior years, obviously. We are currently doing a drive-through pickup service at 20 of our school locations. And then you can see the meals served daily this week, starting on Monday, 6,268. And then the last week on Friday, it was 7,796. So we grew from Monday, August 10th to Friday, August 14th. And this is just an example of the Davis cafeteria remodel. This is one of our now annual high school remodels. Johansson and Modesto High have been completed in prior years. This year, as you can see, just an amazing transformation of the Davis cafeteria. And then next summer, it will be Downey High School. And then our transportation department is not, again, that is a 2019 photo of the department. It is not this year. And just some facts about our transportation. We have 59 buses, 50 bus drivers and bus monitors, and they are working daily. And we are not transporting students, but we are doing the following. We're assisting with the daily meal delivery program. We're working with IT services, and then we have some drivers running routes or driving routes to deliver staff to various locations. We have gotten some calls from concerned parents as to why school buses are on the road when we're not delivering students. And of course, we've had to explain to them, this is what we're doing to support our distance learning. And then and their day is being rounded out by 2 hours of professional development daily. So it's a good opportunity for us to get in necessary professional development to our bus drivers. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Russ Selkin, our Chief Technology Officer.
Good evening, Board of Trustees. First, I'd like to kind of take a step back and just a couple reminders from the last presentation that we did accomplish over the summer. Those key projects that tie into this fall, like aggregation of one database for our PowerSchool, our student information system, and a lot of other system upgrades. As we get down into a couple more slides, you'll see some of the projects that we are continuing to work on as this fall rolls out. First of all, we have to remember that all of the students kept their computers this last spring, and we had 10,000 distributed. Those were new students or students that are moving from a different grade level and needing a Windows computer if they're going from elementary into 7th grade. So we also migrated some schools to Chrome, which was Davis, Johansson, and Hanshaw, which in a few slides here you'll see significantly helped some of the challenges we had as we started the school year. The first week, almost 5,000 tickets were opened. And we solved as of end of day on Saturday, because we've been working overtime and weekend, we got it down to 4,200 tickets resolved. So we only had about 800 tickets after the weekend. And the calls were 3379 for the week. Today was another busy day. So we had approximately, again, 700 to 800 tickets and about 649 calls. As we go on to the next slide, just want to address the first week of school. We did have some significant challenges the first day of school. It really boiled down to two key areas. First, we had some challenges with our security server that affects both what they call IPsec, which is a tunnel that comes back so that the students and also staff members come back to a secure channel back to our network for access to data that could be FERPA, SIPA compliant type of data. And the second one was our web server. First one, they had some load balancing issues. Basically, our vendor had said it had capacity up to 30,000 remote devices. That ended up not being the case. So we pivoted on Monday afternoon to get one upgrade and an additional upgrade, 2 systems upgrade by early afternoon on Tuesday. What the end result was is our users saw significant slowness and in disconnects on the first day of school, and it ran into the second day. On the web server, we had some tuning and balancing. What we set up is everyone on the first day of school, all 30,000 students, would connect to their school site's web page, which happens to run on a single server. It's load balanced, but it had some tuning and balancing to take that many connections simultaneously. So we worked through that again with tuning and balancing and some hardware upgrades. And on the next slide, you can see all of this came to great team work. We saw earlier on transportation, we've leveraged staff. An example of daily pivoting was we had literally 50 families waiting out here in front of our Reno location for hardware devices. So we created like an in and out. You know how In-N-Out has people that expedite your order? We were doing the same thing. We were taking bus people and also some other staff members and going out and taking the request of what the issue was, pulling it back into the building for techs to quickly resolve it within 5 minutes or less. And if they couldn't, we just give a new device out. So that was kind of an example of leveraging other resources as well as pivoting on an hourly basis. External resources are going to be brought into our network system to get what I call a second or third set of eyes. We still had some challenges today with some tuning and balancing on the performance, but we've taken some steps to alleviate that for the long term, especially with the Chrome devices. Specifically, we're able to take those devices, which is one of the many reasons why I took to the board last year why we wanted to migrate to Chrome. We can single-handedly, in a matter of a few minutes, redirect those Chromebooks to a different filtering mechanism or get them off of our IP security server and redirect it if there's problems, which that's what we did on Tuesday, and we also did that earlier this morning to help redirect the traffic. It's kind of like our traffic was built. We built the freeway to go to Livermore, and that was great until COVID hit, right? The traffic patterns are all towards Livermore. As soon as COVID hit, the traffic patterns changed to Fresno, but now we have to adjust our system because the freeway was only 2 lanes to Fresno, 4 lanes to Livermore. Now we're changing it to 4 lanes to Fresno. So that's kind of an analogy about what the network work that's being done. So we're going to continue to migrate to a different firewall and filtering system. We'll be doing that, which means in the next 4 to 6 weeks, we'll accomplish that. But it may mean we have some bumps in the road where we have to adjust our systems to account for the different traffic patterns and the heavy loads. Because last spring, we didn't have all 30,000 students hitting the system at the exact same time, and now we do. So this is kind of also some preliminary things that help set this up. One thing that all of this work before the school year started, you can see the significant amount of training, videos, self-paced courses that were done. And what was interesting is the first week, not only did we have those technical issues relative to the internet access, but we had an average length of call for 15 minutes. And what my help desk staff has been experiencing is the first week, people were trying to get onto the systems. This week, they have specific issues they want us to help to work through. So our time on the phone with customers was 15 minutes last week. It's dropped down to 8 minutes this week. But part of it I have to say address is we're redirecting them to some of these great online resources that both the ed tech in my department as well as in CIPD have put together for both staff and students. And on the next slide, it kind of goes into what is this, the future challenges and the next opportunities. We have to take a step back. And I remember I've been in education for 25 years, and I started at a county office where we were doing dial-up modems that long ago. And when I came on board, I said, hey, I'll do whatever you want. I'll pump gas, and I'm helping out end users, but that's not effective, efficient because my bricks and mortar customers are suffering from this. Well, it's a new day. we have to support the students at home. They don't have anywhere else to go. But we went from supporting 34 school sites to actually supporting, you could say, 34 school sites plus 20,000 homes. So it's been a monumental change for my staff in terms of the workload. And I'll give you an example where on that first Monday, when the problems were coming in like a tidal wave, we had actually within a couple hours solved that it wasn't something with our equipment, it was with the Comcast hardware, the cable modem, that we had to gen back, so to speak, or bring back our Chromebooks to a different driver in order to connect to their systems. So, and even advising them, hey, call your ISP, your cable modem provider, you can get a free upgrade on your equipment and you'll see doubling of the speed. We call and check back, they didn't have any extra cost and it doubled their speed. So a lot of advisory at the tech level for the home, for all the students and the parents. And consistency in customer service, that's one thing that we're working on, is continue to make sure that we have good consistency in hours. We're trying to expand those, as well as our call center. Some of the time, the ways to get the calls down to 8 minutes or less has to do with the approach that we're taking. We also expanded to 4 service centers. And what those are is if my student goes over to a different part of our district, I don't have to drive all the way to Reno. I can go to a local service center for physical hardware issues, as well as the temporary hot zones. And one of the last future things two big things that we're working on, one is because this isn't going to change. Our students are still going to need access from home. We want to look at a cost-effective strategy maybe to build our own LTE system. A lot of districts in the state of California and the nation are looking at this, but we're going to take both an ongoing, what I call a total cost of ownership approach to this. Another thing is we see rolling blackouts. Even though Modesto Irrigation District doesn't have a history of that, we have to remember that part of our district at the home, the students may have power, but if our core network goes down, education's not going to take place. So Roger and I had a conversation early this morning. We're going to look at a short-term solution, so we have generator backup so we can run all day long for multiple days if the network goes down in power at Reno Avenue, but the rest of the district has power. So that kind of concludes, and I'm going to turn over to my colleague, Dr. Odell.
I just want to tell you how fun that was. The other day I was walking and I actually saw Russ's team, like he says, the in and out version where they had a line of cars, and I believe it was some transportation folks that were going out to the car with their masks on and a clipboard and writing some information down and running back to the hub. It was really fun to see, and I could see the faces of the drivers. You know, they weren't nearly as frustrated as I would have expected. So that was really fun to see, and I appreciated that team effort, everybody checking in. Well, curriculum and instruction, you've heard a lot about what we've been doing. Again, our focus opening school was to ensure that there was quality supports for our teachers for distance learning, those helping how to even create the classroom and create rapport and different technology apps they could do that. Our focus is always pedagogy. Technology supports and enhances excellent pedagogy. And we have a lot of MVA supports that we continue to curate and work on as well. My team also led the bilingual hotline. That's ringing off the hooks, and we need to make sure that we continue to provide supports to our most vulnerable language families that really need support and understanding what's happening in our system. We do have office hours for our teachers. I think the last thing I heard, we had 170 in one day come to the ELA office hours. So they're using that resource that we have made for them. Like Mike said, Mike Henderson, we've been doing a ton of PD for the new teachers, curriculum, as well as Schoology. Some people are excellent with Google, but they've never done Schoology or something like that. So we've had to make sure that they have the supports they need. And of course, the substitute supports. It's been really important that if a sub's going to come in, they need to know Schoology. They need to know how to get on, how to take attendance, and how to continue the work of the teacher. So that's the alley that we've been working on. Thank you. Let's see, I'm handing it off to Mr. Herbst.
Why, thank you, Dr. Odell. Good evening. To start, Student Support Services welcomed 4,116 students with disabilities back for distance learning. And while that's not ideal, we feel we're in a much, much better place than we were last spring. And one of those big differences is our paraprofessional staff now have been issued devices. And this is going to allow our special education teams to better meet the needs of our students and provide a greater degree of individualization, which is important to our students with disabilities. It's important to note that even in a distance learning format, we're pleased to have 588 students currently enrolled in the After School ACES program. So it goes to show, even in a virtual setting, we still offer exciting enrichment opportunities and assistance with the students' academics. We actually continue to enroll additional students daily. That was earlier last week, so I did not get an updated number, but I would assume it's above the 588. Mr. Godot, next slide. A couple other highlights. We trained our multi-tiered system of support coaches to specifically support our staff in distance learning. So they're right there, boots on the ground, assisting our teachers. And so far, this has been widely utilized and has been seen as a tremendous benefit. We also migrated to an online enrollment system, which has allowed us to do a number of tasks, including emergency form verification, enrollment on the first day of school, which basically has reduced the number of parents who have to spend time going into the office, which is a benefit obviously during this environment, but also is meant to speed up the process for our families when it comes to enrollment and some of those that needed paperwork. In planning for us to return, we offered targeted training to our campus supervisors and yard duties regarding safety practices and how to de-escalate challenging situations. And finally, to comply with Senate Bill 98, we also developed re-engagement procedures, which outline the steps sequentially that we follow when a student misses full days of distance learning for what would appear to be the old kind of unexcused reasons per se, but it basically outlines our way of re-engaging those students in the process. So overall, Student Support Services is off to a very, very good start. Next, I turn it back over to Associate Superintendent Godot.
Thank you, Mr. Herbst. So educational services, we were working leading up to the start of school, working with CIPD on the gradual release responsibility model, which is basically lesson design, and that PD to prepare our teachers was delivered through the context of distance learning. So how do we use the various applications that we have to build a research-based lesson? We've also spent the last week working with MTA in a partnership to define some of the nuances of distance learning and what those instructional expectations are. We've been coordinating site and community supports, and our school sites have been reaching out to all of the families in our district that we surveyed that indicated they did not have internet or that we have not heard back from them yet whether or not they have internet. So that's been a great deal of work that's been going on out at the school sites. The first day of school, we had planned a first day of school launch that I'm sure you're all aware of. There definitely were some technical issues there, but that district-wide event is something to celebrate because we did see an uptick of social media and engagement and just celebrating the start of school. Dr. Noguchi's address on YouTube that was broadcast on that first day did go out to 6,000 plus users that day. And at the end of last Friday, I believe it was just over 21,000 people had viewed that message. We've also spent the last couple of weeks, particularly last week, working with the expansion of Modesto Virtual Academy. So if you'll recall, we had nearly 4,200 pre-registrations occur between June 16th and July 16th. The sites and our teams have been reaching out to those families. And you'll see the data point there for registrations. Those 2,169 families or students were families that we reached out to after they had indicated that they were interested. And from those 2,169, we've completed the intake process for just over 1,100 students. We are still engaging in the intake process for 349 students. And we've assigned those students that have completed the process. 947 of them are already assigned to an MVA teacher. You'll notice there that just over 400 students declined after we started the intake process for whatever that reason was, whether they were going to stay in the distance learning environment at their sites. And we are still working with the goal by the end of this week that all students that have indicated and engaged in the intake process for MVA will be placed with their MVA instructor. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kristen Nelson, Chief Communications Officer.
Kristen Noonan.
Noonan,
Yeah.
thank you.
All good. So don't worry, I have the home stretch for us, and I actually have some of the happy photos that we're really excited that people shared with us. So thank you to those of you who have shared them, who are watching today. So Mr. Godot, you can go ahead and go through, but I just want to point out, look at our kids. They're really embracing what they're experiencing, and I think we all have empathy and we all feel for what's happening, not only for our kids but for our parents, for our staff, because this is really a shift for all of us. This is brand new for all of us, but I think these smiling faces say it all. I love that parents actually still embrace the first day of school photos. That teacher, she's Mrs. Stevens, she's definitely having a great time. And the middle photo, I'm really lobbying Dr. Noguchi for all of us to get ducks at the district office, because I think that would be I would love to hold a duck all day as I'm working. So, but I love that the students are really embracing it. Go ahead to the next slide. This is some photos of one of the teachers from Bayer. This is one of the second graders who was very diligently watching Dr. Noguchi's welcome statement on the 10th. And the next slide actually shows the principal from Bayer, Mr. Dan Park, as well as one of his students on the right. And then we have a Fremont Open Plan student in the middle. But you can really see everybody's really trying to make the best of it, including our teachers. And I think that this slide, especially the photo on the right, that's an instructor out of Grigori. And I think that really shows the reality that our teachers are facing in terms of empty classrooms, but you also saw the reality that our students are facing. And like I said, I think everyone is making the best of it. So the next slide, it does cover, we did have obviously some negative media coverage, and obviously that's to be expected when you have an issue like what we experienced. There was a positive story though in today's Modesto Bee by Deke Farrow about that we're tackling these challenges. And if you go to the next slide, you can actually see some of the messaging that we were putting out, and we were posting a lot of these very urgently on social media. Our social media population has grown exponentially. We're almost at almost 5,000 followers on Instagram and almost 10,000 followers on Facebook. So we really are using these channels as methods to get information out as quickly as possible. But I do want to share that we did receive encouragement. We obviously had a lot of feedback from people on what could be done better, but we also have encouragement. And, specifically Johansson High School, a parent reached out and said that, they were really impressed. They know it's hard times for everyone and the teachers just did great. And thank you. And I think the last sentence of the second quote, she said her daughter is in second grade. Actually, that was one of the second graders that we featured in one of the photos. And she said, even with the glitches, she had a great day, but it really is an impossibly difficult situation. And I think that summarizes it for everyone. So we're all trying to make the best of it. One thing I want to highlight is actually Mady Herrera, who's part of the communications team. She leads the Student, Parent, and Community Support Services Division. They've done a phenomenal job working with the Technology Services Department and Lauren Odell's department as well in constructing several parent and student resources. And Mady's team, for example, they have done several virtual training classes on the tools that parents can use, and I'm just highlighting parents in this case, that parents can use in order to help their child with their education. And as you can see, their classes actually started, I should have added this, they started on July 30th. So between July 30th and August 13th, they had close to 2,700 parents who participated. And this is a valuable resource. It's linked right off of the MCS for Kids homepage. So I would definitely encourage the viewers to check that out. And the other thing I would encourage people to check out, if you go to the next slide, there we go, is our community feedback forum that we have this Wednesday. So in 2 days, we are going to be recording this forum. So don't worry if you can't make it, we will have it recorded. But if you are able to attend live via the online link that I have listed here, that gives you an opportunity to provide input in the chat section. And then we also have a survey, which is going to be linked from the homepage on the website for those people who cannot attend the online forum. So we have several different tools. So I'll just summarize it and then we can open it up for questions. The next steps, we're definitely doing an after action review on not only the first day, but really the first week. And we're going to continue to provide internet connectivity solutions, as Mr. Selkin and Mr. Godot both mentioned. And Mr. Herbst also mentioned that we're going to be monitoring and providing ongoing support for student attendance and engaging on any issues. And we're doing that on a daily basis. We really want to keep that line of communication open. And we're still working with our labor partners to make sure that we're identifying areas of need and collaborating with them and identifying viable solutions, because things change, as you know, very, very quickly in the times that we're living in right now. And as I mentioned, ongoing parent education and support. So we are happy as a cabinet to take questions, and I think Mr. Godot will probably stop sharing, and then we'll turn it back over to you, Vice President West.
Thank you. Make sure I'm not on mute. Thanks to all of you who put so much time and effort into this report. It was so thorough and so informative. And I just want to tell you, we appreciate all the work that went into doing this report. I especially love seeing the pictures of the staff members and the students working hard to make this year a success. So I'd like to start with Ms. Noonan to see if we have any questions from or comments from the public.
No, we do not on this item.
All right, thank you. We're going to go ahead and take questions or comments from the board. And then after this, we're going to be having a short break. So do we have any questions or comments? It looks like Trustee Lopez.
Yes, I did have a comment, but Trustee Walker raised his hand first, so I'll defer to him. Go ahead.
Trustee Walker, do you want to go?
Sure. I think it was an interesting report, and I think it was good. We had problems sort of Monday, Tuesday, and I can confirm because I went back and told Sarah that I jumped in the help desk line. It took about 15 minutes, but that wasn't bad, all things considered. I thought when I got on hold, I would be there for much longer than that. The answer was pretty good, and we just kept chugging. By Thursday, Friday, we're in good shape, and the National City Schools device was working. Prior to that, we were using my home device. And then today, everything was fine. I think the key word in that presentation when Russ was talking was one word, pivot. In the past, there was no pivot. I've been here long enough that when we had IT tech problems, the word we used was called crash and gone. I mean, it would literally disappear for weeks. I remember sitting here 1 year for 2 weeks, you couldn't get a Word document open. The fact that we have the ability to pivot now is just such a huge improvement. The ability to explain this idea of the networks, Livermore versus Fresno, and making those things change over, again, super encouraging. The idea of the LTE and getting our own internal system set up, I think that's something that we should absolutely take a look at. And then my encouragement there would be, you get what you pay for. And so to my fellow board members, I'm not as big a fan of the expensive devices, but I think when we put in the fiber and the connectivity and all the internet stuff between our sites, we really did pay up there. And I think that's paid off in the long run, is that when we're talking about infrastructure, that's worth paying up for. And I think in the long term, that would be a big win for us. The MVA exit would be something I'd be interested in sort of following in the future. I'd be real interested in seeing how many folks sort of stick through that process, just as sort of a data point on independent study that I think is not necessarily something that's going to change what we're doing, but it would just be interesting to know how many people really want to stick with that and keep trucking with that versus not, because you don't know what you're getting. And then I think the one question I have would probably fall back to Russ. and it's what I've seen from parents I've talked to and just sort of my own internal gut feeling. How much problems are we seeing with students with 3 or 4 family members in a house where you have a second, a third, a fifth, or a seventh grader trying to access video on the internet because it's expensive? You know, if I get everybody on my house on video at the same time, we can sort of manage it. But I pay a great deal for my internet speed because I used to work off of it. There's nothing we can do about that. Would that be a correct statement versus the $10 a month hotspot versus really being able to manage the capacity of video?
I mean, you hit on a couple of different key strategies. One is the video, that we try to educate people that if you don't need the video, turn it off. And it is true that when you have 3 students on at the same time, that's where we're finding that I have some really good staff here that are asking the next level of question. When was the last time you got your cable modem updated and replaced? And we found that some of them don't have to pay any more. They get the latest version of the cable modem and it doubles their bandwidth or their speed. So those are the type of questions that when they call in and have problems. And the other part of it is, like, there is a family, they called in and I specifically worked with them. They had 5 students, 3 students from another district, 2 from ours. And we gave them a hotspot. It worked fine for the 2, but student 3 through 5, that's where we'll have to just pivot, so to speak, and give them a second hotspot. I mean, we have to adapt. And that's why I'm intrigued to look at the business as well as the service level that our own LTE system, because those hotspots are $250 a year. And it's just been because of COVID that they don't have a rate limit. They don't tell you about the rate limit. You just notice after about 2 weeks, it drops to 128K. That's what we monitor, is the speed on the back end. So it's not one answer fits all. It's a scenario, and that's why our help desk, our call center is very critical for those calls to walk those families through it, because this is new to them. They're not used to that, having 3 kids on at the same time. They might be watching Netflix in the evening, but not having 3 kids simultaneously doing their homework and video at the same time.
Yeah, no, and that makes a lot of sense because, and again, I did my internet not that long ago where I had to take in what was, I thought, a new device, but apparently I was on the back end of the distribution list. And so my new modem, whatever you want to call it, network broadcaster guy, was old when I got it, and then it was new when I got another one, and then off it went. But I think as long as you guys are paying attention, I think multiple kids in the house is going to be tricky. And then my long-term question, which will be left to my colleagues on the board, would be a conversation about screen time. And I think that that's sort of missing here, just from the big picture, is how much time are these kids spending on top of the screens? Because, and especially the little ones. I mean, I really worry about K through 6, K through 8, but I've got a senior who has a long day on Tuesday, Fridays, and had 3 or 4 or 5 hours that she was staring at a computer and came down and asked me, how did you do that for 20 years? Mm-hmm. Where you did 8, 10, 12, 14 hours a day on a computer staring at it. And my response was, that's why I wear glasses when I read, and my eyes aren't so good anymore. Mm-hmm. But I think that's a conversation that's worth having for my colleagues on the board in the future is, how do we look at screen time and limit that, or certainly try to mitigate it? Because it's a touchy topic. And I know we're being forced into it, but I think if we address it head on, at least we'll be ahead of the curve, and being ahead is better than being behind.
Right. Digital fatigue. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Walker. We're going to go with Trustee Lopez and then Trustee Brown.
I didn't have a question. I just wanted to kind of go along with the whole pivot conversation, and then I just wanted to thank folks, because that kind of work of like, hey, we have our buses that, or we have our buses available to us, and folks want to help out, and folks want to be team members, and using our resources adequately and shifting to meet the needs, and while still, being able to bring people on board. That's impressive, especially in these times economically, that people can still feel like a part of a team, maybe in a different manner, but part of a team. It's amazing. The other thing, again, we know that there was going to be hiccups. We understand that. And even if we were 100% sure we were prepared for day one, we knew that something was going to come up. But the pivot is the important part. How fast are we able to shift and meet the needs that we were met with? So I appreciate it, and I commend everyone in this room, everyone in this call, but everyone that took part, everyone in the district that took part of that pivot. I know that my my brother had technical difficulties and he went to the in and out services, which he was in and out in pretty speedy time. So I know that we appreciate that, and I know everyone appreciates the work that everyone's doing and making sure that we can get our kids learning as fast as possible to the best degree. And I would be a strong supporter of a district LTE function.
Thank you. Trustee Brown and then President Marks.
So I want to express gratitude for the entire district's approach of focusing on the needs of the one student, the individual student, and the fact that we're now looking to make sure that the very last students who don't have connectivity at home are there. So I appreciate the fact that we're trying to do things to address the needs of our special ed students who are particularly challenged with this distance learning format. And I'm concerned about our very youngest students and, students who are in households where both parents are working. Want to make sure that we're addressing needs of those households to make sure that that kids still have the chance to learn if parents aren't home with them. Without, if they're in a child care situation as opposed to parental care, the focus is not going to be able to be the same as a parent could provide if they were home with the kids. So appreciate the attention that individual needs are being addressed and appreciate the parental learning aspect of this that is being taught. But I do have a question. The LTE acronym is being thrown around and I don't know what that means. Can I get an explanation, please?
Yeah, it's basically the generation of wireless that we've come in to know, like you hear 5G, it's just the newer digital frequencies. And there's some that are licensed and some that are not licensed. And specifically the LTE I'm talking about is a licensed frequency. So it means that you don't have someone firing up their own ham radio operator interfere with your frequency. And there's distances and coverage. The one that we would be looking at is a licensed one, and it would be a 7-mile radius. The ones that you see districts jumping on the bandwagon right now are the 1.5-mile radius, which wouldn't do us a lot of good in most scenarios.
So we would be able to reach the students on our own.
Yep, yeah, we would have our own tower system potentially. And again, it's going to be an analysis in terms of frequency coverage, cost, long-term cost of ownership, pricing out if we were to outsource that versus have our own system that we maintain and what's the annual maintenance of it. So theoretically, I think 3 to 4 towers would cover our entire district, and we might be able to partner with some of the surrounding districts to help them out and make it advantageous for all of our students, even the feeder district students.
And what kind of a time frame would that be in best circumstances?
Well, in best, to be quite honest, because I believe in buy once, cry once, do it right the first time. Probably between November to December, I would be coming back. First an educational opportunity is then well as what the cost and benefit analysis. But it could be the first of the year. We could fast track it, but I'm just a little concerned right now since I'm in the infancy of the research and the analysis. Yeah, go slow to do it right the first time.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And then we'll hear from President Marks and then Trustee Irvin.
Okay, I got it. All right, it's just a little touchy, I guess. Thank you so much for this great report. I really appreciate having a first day of school, especially this year. I don't know if I've ever looked forward to the first day of school report as much as I did this year, just to hear how things went. And but just to recognize that who in their right mind would think you wouldn't have any problems with 30,000 students getting on the internet on the first day? So I commend you all for working through all that and the different aspects that created. And I also thank you for the on the parent support side. That's the most questions I've received from the public was about how are we helping the parents help their students get online, and especially our non-English speaking parents and those who struggle. And I was able to let them know that we had videos available for them. We had different people they could contact. Just really helpful. Love the hotline, and that even though it's being overwhelmed right now, I know that it's been extremely beneficial to the families. So I just want to thank you for that. The questions that I was going to have, it sounds like Mr. Brown had asked some of them, because I was going to ask you questions about the towers and creating support for our students that didn't have internet access. And that's been something that's been a concern, I have to say, all down the Central Valley. And so that is something that I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of information we gather from that, and if we can do that. And I really love the idea of partnering with our other school districts. I think that'll be beneficial to everybody. So no real question, it was already answered, but I really did want to make a comment. So I appreciate all that you did to make this week, these last 2 weeks, go so well, even though there were challenges. So thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Irvin.
Yes, I just wanted to reiterate my colleagues' appreciation. I can definitely appreciate the effectiveness and the speed in which the issues were resolved. My former employer, one of the colleges north of us that I worked at, decided to implement a massive technology change in financial aid, enrollment services, student services, all at the same time. And before you know it, it was a huge collapse of the system and the infrastructure at the college, and students were kicked out of classes, not in classes that they were on. Financial aid checks were not processed, and it was just a mess. And students were ultimately the victims in the whole thing, because had they phased everything in like suggested, we wouldn't have had the technological disaster we had that impacted all of the students on campus. And at the particular college, they had over 20,000 students that were impacted. And classes, they were, not in classes, being able to get in their classes. They were kicked out of their classes. The system was not putting students in classes like it's supposed to, so students wasn't getting their financial aid check because it was showing that they were in halftime as students, and it was just a big mess. Students who were registered were now not registered, and it took almost 2 weeks to get and resolve through that. And right after that, when that happened, and after they cleared everything up, the head of technology retired right then and there. So thank you, Russ, and your team and everybody involved in our district with getting our students and our families connected and resolving the situation to a positive end, and as we continue to mitigate anything that comes our way. So I can definitely appreciate it after going through what I went through almost 2 years ago.
Thank you. Seeing no more hands, I have just one comment to make. I know we have a lot of supports for our parents in technology and supports to help them help their children. The feedback I'm hearing, which I don't know how we're going to help this, are parents who are the only adult in the house and they have 2 young children they're trying to help at the same time. So if anyone has ideas on some possible cloning, activities that we can do to help these parents have two sets of hands to help two kids at the same time. But I'm not sure how we're going to solve that. But that is a concern for a lot of the parents who are struggling to help more than one child at the same time. But again, thank you for your report. It's 7:40. I would like to take a break until 7:50. If it's possible for us to have a clock that does a countdown, that would be great. And so we will see everyone back here at 7:50. Thank you. Welcome back. We next are going to hear a report on the 45-day budget revision. Mr. Zierli.
Yes, let me grab the presentation real quick. Okay, I believe you can see it now.
No. Yes.
Okay. Okay, so tonight, what we want to share with the board and the purpose of the presentation is a 45-day budget revision. We're also going to review the final State Budget Act. We're going to talk about our assumptions now for revenue and expenditures, and then the multi-year projection for the 45-day budget revision. So what is a 45-day budget revision? One, it is not required, and it is not common. Probably the last time districts saw 45-day budget revision occur regularly was about probably 9 to 10 years ago, when we typically saw the state rushing to adopt the budget and then doing a mid-year budget reduction or a mid-year budget revision once their revenues were better known at that point in time. This year it is advisable due to significant changes from the May revision, and we'll talk about that. And then we have 45 days from the budget enactment on which to present our revisions to the board. The governor signed the Budget Act on June 29th, and so the 45-day timeline ends on August 13th. There is no SACS version. This is not a standard revision, so there's no SACS version, so you don't see the typical 200 to 300 pages that you would see in the SACS documentation for a budget revision. So the State Budget Act is drastically different from the governor's May revision. If you recall, the governor's May revision called for a 10% reduction to the local control funding formula. And what we received with the State Budget Act is about as good as we could have hoped for, considering the still state of the economy with the pandemic. In the State Budget Act, there were no local control funding formula cuts. It was flat funding. There was no increases. But again, that's about as good as we could hope for this particular fiscal year. There were new ongoing resources for special education. That's a welcome relief. We haven't seen any significant increases in special education for a number of years. And then we also received another round of pension contribution relief, this time for 2 years. So how did the state go about this, going from a 10% reduction to really, in essence, flat funding in a matter of a couple of months? The state is implementing what is called cash deferrals. We'll talk about those. You'll see a couple slides on those here in a minute. $11 billion. So in essence, the state was able to defer $11 billion of expenditures from one budget year to the next. And those deferrals are into the 21-22 fiscal year, which helps them balance the budget. And they're also were able to use a one-time withdrawal of funds in the public school system stabilization account. This is one time, so these funds are now drawn down, and they will not be able to utilize that particular method if they need it again next fiscal year. The state budget also authorizes the reduction of the deferred payments if new federal funds. We'll talk about the first round of federal funds. So if new federal funds come in, those dollars will go to offset the cash deferrals, and the Budget Act requires that the earliest deferrals come off the books first. If this happens, the state will ensure that they have the same budget flexibility tool for 21-22 if the financial picture does not improve. However, that's a risk to the state budget. We'll talk about these other items, but if the federal dollars do not come in, then the state cannot utilize the cash deferrals again. So that $11 billion, they would have to find ways to do budget reductions instead of being able to just defer the cash from one year to the next. There's also continued record of unemployment. which causes the sustained economic downturn from closed businesses. And then the possibility of a revised state budget this fall is still a real possibility. We talked about that when we presented our budget adoption for you. And depending on what happens in the next couple of months, the state may have to do another revision. So we may be doing this again here in the future. This slide just shows you really the roller coaster that we've been on since January. So just really look at the top line here. That's our local control funding formula funding or proposal. In January, the governor proposed to increase it by $1.2 billion. Then in May, you see we were hit with a reduction of $6.5 billion to the local control funding formula. And then the enacted budget is flat funding, so there was zero change. So you can see just in a matter of 6 to 7 months, the different variables that went into play, and then how that represents constant fluctuations in the state funding estimates. We all know that there's talk about additional federal fundings. That this slide was done at a time when the House had approved the HEROES Act. That is stalled in the Senate. You can see what Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell describes the HEROES Act as dead on arrival. And then again, if the federal funding does materialize, then cash deferrals may be reduced in this year. And what are cash deferrals? They are, it allows the state to delay the schedule of apportionment. So we get our funding apportionments. They get to defer it to another time period, in this particular case, to another fiscal year. So it gives them kind of a little flexibility on their side to recognize this as a budget reduction in the state's budget. But for us, it's a matter of not receiving the cash that we expected to receive until later on in the year. It's in essence an IOU is what the state is issuing to us. This probably Trustee Marks would recognize this particular slide. Back 8, 9, 10 years ago, we would see the movement of these money bags. And so what this shows is the cash deferrals. And it goes from 1 year, 2021, to the next year, 21-22. So if you look at the first bag is in February, what we would normally receive in February is going to be reduced, and we would not receive that until November of 21. So you're looking at about a 9-month deferral, from receiving cash into the next fiscal year. And you can see how it gets shortened up as the bags go down. The biggest one is at the bottom. That's what they call a June to July deferral. And so they're moving, it's their biggest one. They're able to move $4.2 billion from June into July. And you'll see on the next slide, the June apportionment that we normally expect to receive, we'll get zero in the month of June, and that'll all be deferred into the month of July. And in total, and we talk about our cash, we expect to receive about 68% of our typical cash. Now, I just want to be clear, this is not a budget reduction. This is just our cash. And so you will see we're not reducing our budget by 30%, but we have to plan for receiving 30% less cash. And we may bring a proposal to the board in the future as to how we will mitigate against that with some future borrowing. But you can see we're down on the bottom. We would typically get 9% in February of our state apportionment. We're going to get 5%. And go down to the bottom, which is June of 21. They're going to defer 100% of that apportionment, and we're going to get zero in June, and we'll get it all in July. So why are we revising our budget? Mainly, it's around revenue related to the State Budget Act, $19 million. So this is going from a 10% reduction to flat funding. We're able to increase our revenue by $19 million. $14.3 million is base funding increase, and $4.8 million would be identified as supplemental concentration grant funds. We're also getting the CARES funds that came from the federal government through the state government, $38 million. And you can see the different pots of money that we have that we have given these accounts. There's 5 different pots of money in addition to SB 117, which is the state allocation that they gave us to offset any COVID-19 related expenses. As previously mentioned, we're also getting pension rate buy downs. And so you can see the rates for CalSTRS and CalPERS. And then the rates for 21-22 are not set yet. They're subject to fluctuation. We'll know more as we get closer to that particular fiscal year. Our expenditure assumptions related to the State Budget Act. Since we're receiving and budgeting the federal dollars, we have to account for the expenditures, even though we haven't identified how we're going to expend the dollars yet. So $36 million is in our budget in this budget revision to offset the revenue that's come in for the CARES dollars. Just shy of $3.8 million we have recognized as already COVID-related costs that were from April, May, and June. So now we have funding for that. We're able to recognize that in this revision. $4.8 million are being reduced for the prior slide that talked about our pension obligation reductions. And the net of the revenue and the expenditures is a $25 million increase to our projected ending fund balance. Multi-year projections related to this, you can see our now revised budget is the first column. We have a budget deficit projection of $5.2 million. If you were to go back to June when we adopted a budget, that deficit was $28 million is what we had at that point in time as far as our projection. And that represented a 10% reduction. So you can see what it looks like, the major difference in the flat funding. If you go to year 3, 22-23, you'll notice that jumps. That's because the pension relief that we talked about is only for 2 years, and then it goes back up in year 3 of our multi-year projection. So again, as I mentioned on the first slide, this is about as good as we could have hoped for based on what is going on, not only at the state, but at the national economic level. And we're proud and pleased to bring this 45-day revision to you at this point in time. And with that, I will exit out of here and then be available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Zierle. Do we have any questions? President Marks?
Yes, I have 2 questions. One is, it has to do with, you mentioned something about the borrowing, and I wanted to ask that question about, are we going to borrow? I mean, if we have to borrow, how will that affect the, well, what are the interest rates and how will that affect our future? And do we have enough in reserves to help get us by so we don't have to pay the extra interest rates? That's my first question. Sorry.
Okay. We are preparing what we call a cash flow with the State Budget Act. So we will have that. We will have those answers to you here shortly, probably in a couple of weeks. The expectation is with our reserves level that it's at, we will, and our own ability to borrow from ourselves within our funds. What I'm showing you is just the general fund. There's a good chance we'll make it to the end of this year without having to do outside borrowing. But it used to be when we talked about issuing a TRAN, and for those of you that are new or haven't heard of TRAN, that's a revenue anticipation note. It's a taxable revenue anticipation note that we're able to issue. And then what it does is we set the payment schedule. So when our apportionment comes in, if you go back and look at those money bags being moved, we would set the repayment when we have the dollars to repay it. And so in all likelihood, it's going to cross fiscal years. So we may borrow late in this fiscal year to get us through the remainder of this year and next year. It would be subject to whatever the interest rates, the borrowing costs are at that point in time. I'd hate to speculate right now what that would be, but As we saw with our bond issuance, we are in a very strong rated situation, so I would expect our borrowing costs to be very low for this.
That's great. Okay, my second one is, how will this affect our day-to-day functioning as a district? If we, this reduction in, well, deferrals, all these deferrals.
Think of it as your own, I guess, your own personal situation. If you're reliant on a paycheck and you have to go a month or two without receiving that paycheck, am I going to have to reach into my savings to pay my bills, use a credit card, or whatever? We have ongoing obligations. Obviously, the largest ongoing obligation we have is to our employees, and to be able to continue to pay our employees and the costs associated with that. And so that's our first priority. We are in what we call a spending freeze at the moment to preserve our cash, and so anything that would be deemed not essential, that doesn't allow for distance learning or our virtual academy or early childhood education, those are being put on hold in order to preserve our cash for what we are calling our essential expenditures when the deferrals happen. So with some planning, I don't think anybody will see any impact of the cash deferrals on our system, and really that's the plan, is to not let this impact any employee or any particular program. We'll monitor the cash behind the scenes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I have two trustees. I'm not sure who was first, Trustee Irvin or Trustee Brown. We'll go with Trustee Irvin first.
Okay, I was just going to say, actually, the question I had was actually the same question that President Marks just asked about the deferral. So I'm good with that answer.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Brown.
So my question has to do with the CARES money, the extra funds that came into the district. My understanding is that those funds need to be used by December. Is that correct? And how are we at utilizing those funds? Can we move some of our expenses to be offset by CARES money and then use, I don't know, can we trade things around to let that CARES money help us through this crisis?
So we have about $40 million that we've identified as revenue being received for COVID-related expenses, and about 30 million of that is subject to a spending deadline of December 30th, and then the remainder of that we have until September 22 to spend those dollars. And so we are looking at, these are federal dollars, and with any federal program, you always have the supplant versus supplement rules anytime it comes from the federal government. One thing about these funds, though, is we're still waiting audit requirements on how to utilize these funds. We do have, if you go on the CDE website, they do have frequently asked questions to guide how you spend the dollars. So just to take, if I understand your question right, just to take some normal expenses, let's just say a teacher or several teachers that we normally have anyway, that would not be a good use of these funds, because we have to pay that teacher or that staff member for what we're doing. This would be for program related expenses related to distance learning, related to any type of a COVID expenditure that we have. So the superintendent has helped us plan ahead in cabinet. We're talking about this. We talk about this weekly, and we have identified a number of expenditures that we've had to implement since April of last year, and we're well on our way to spending the $30 million that we have to spend by December 30th.
Thank you.
And we will be bringing, I think it's next board meeting, we will be bringing a draft of a plan to the board for those dollars as well.
Thank you. I don't see any other, oh, Trustee Walker?
See, I've gotten good at waiting. I think one of the things I think we've done really well that I think Mr. Zilli just sort of pointed out is how do we use the money? Because unlike a lot of districts, there's so much of what we've done in distance learning with respect to devices and network that we had already done. You know, as I mentioned when Mr. Selkin was talking about the LTE, you know, we'd already put in all these wireless networks across 34 sites across 3 or 4 or 5 years. And so it puts us in a bit of a box. The indicators that I'm watching that make me super nervous are the fact that on the federal side, you'd actually have to get counseling if you think they're going to do anything. Because if my best take is the House has been recessed, the Senate's been recessed, Nancy Pelosi says she's bringing the House back to vote on the post office, but then she'll send them back home. So my sort of take on anything out of Washington is that nothing's going to move until November. Stash the cash I like. I think that that's sort of something we've always done here. We've doubled our reserve from 3 to 6. We've moved money into piles so it doesn't count against our reserve, which puts us in a good place. But I would certainly be advising my colleagues that are still going to be here, stash the cash. And, you know, just sort of hold tight, because I think the other leading indicator out there that makes me really nervous about state money, which in reality is the bulk of our budget. I mean, on a normal year, the federal part of our budget is, you know, this big compared to the state, is that when they were talking about extending the unemployment to $400, the governor's response was the piggy bank is empty. We can't contribute the extra $100 to get to $400, which is not something I realized. But if you think about it, the federal government was going to issue $400 checks, of which the state was only going to be responsible for $100 of it. And the governor said, keep your $300. We don't have any money left. And so that would make me nervous if I was going to be here much longer, because that gives you a long-term trend line. Is if we can't, as a state, come up with $100 in unemployment to match a $300 federal check to help people that aren't working, that's certainly, to me, a leading indicator that there's more pain to come. And I think that at the local level, the more we guard to ensure that there's a minimum effect on that pain is a good thing. But I think that the real good story here coming out of this is that for many, 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 many years, this board has been conservative financially. We've stashed money. We're not buying all this equipment now. We already own it. The wiring's done, the cabling's done, the devices are owned. We weren't installing our labor contracts over year after year. We've done it incrementally. And so I think all in all, you guys have done a great job. But I would certainly be watching those warning signs, because there's nothing moving in DC till December. And my expectation is at the state level that they have not been honest about our state budget, and there's more cuts to come. And I wish you all Godspeed.
Thank you. Not seeing any more hands. I apologize, I have not been calling on our student representative. Student Rep Carranza, did you have anything that you would like to add?
I don't have any additional comments.
Awesome, thank you. And I feel that my questions have all been answered as well. So this is a report only. And we'll go on to our next.
Did it say report only?
A report on the 45-day budget revision.
We need a approval of this to revise the budget. I apologize for that if that's not.
It's not in my notes, but no problem. So we're looking for a motion to approve the revision. Trustee Walker,
second.
And a second by Trustee Irvin. And we're going to go down the roll call. So Trustee Irvin. Okay.
Yes.
Aye. Trustee Brown.
Aye.
President Marks.
Aye.
Trustee Lopez.
Aye.
Trustee Walker.
Aye.
Student Representative Carranza.
Aye.
And myself is an aye, so the motion to approve the budget revision passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, B5 is our discussion on budget priorities, and Mr. Zierle, this is you again.
Yes, it is. Thank you. So as we mentioned in the last presentation, and also Trustee Walker pointed out very well, there's a lot of unknowns as to where we're going. And so we started this back on May 14th. Cabinet met. At that point in time, we were still in shelter in place, and we weren't sure what the 2021 budget year was going to look like. And so Dr. Noguchi had us begin thinking as to what it would look like if we were to have to come up with potential budget reductions. And so Cabinet met on May 14th, strategized and came up with a list of budget priorities. And really what budget priorities are, it's a guiding document for us if or when we have to talk about where we're going to reduce the budget, where's our focus of our budget, and what are we going to try to preserve. And so from there, we went June 3rd, we took this to the Budget Advisory Committee for review. And then again, we reviewed it with the Budget Advisory Committee last week on August 11th. And so now we're presenting it to the board. We're going to ask the board for input. And then if there's any input from tonight or any questions, we will bring it back at the next board meeting for approval. And again, this will guide financial services and the Budget Advisory Committee. If that point in time comes where we do have to go through budget reductions and make recommendations to the board in order to balance our budget. And so you see the budget priorities, the draft, and then these items are what we came up with. Again, we came up with them as cabinet, reviewed it with Budget Advisory Committee. And the first one is around health and safety. Grade instruction the first time, that would be the classroom instruction, the classroom teacher, building the capacity of our teachers, staff, administrators, and parents, academic supports and services, social emotional supports and services, transportation, and then after school programming and summer school programming. Again, this is not a comprehensive list. This is what we put together in order to help guide the work of the Budget Advisory Committee. It's really helping us get out in front of what could be coming down the road, as Trustee Walker pointed out, and it will be easy for then the Budget Advisory Committee to look at this document to help us identify recommendations to the school board.
Thank you, Mr. Zierle. Ms. Noonan, did we have any comments from the public concerning this discussion item?
No, not on this item.
All right, so we're going next to questions or comments from the board. Walker, Trustee Walker.
I think the only thing I don't see on here that I would like to see is sort of going backwards prior to COVID and the pandemic. The one thing that we still sort of had on our to-do list that we still had to work through was CTE education. And I'd really like to see some way to sort of look at how we continue to sort of work that problem, you know, from different angles, because there's CTE where you talk about FFA, but then you can talk about CTE again when you talk about computer science or forensic biology or the nursing programs. And, you know, how we look at those different aspects is not something we really got all the way through because life got in the way. But I'd like to certainly see a way to sort of preserve that and still relook at that concept as to what we're doing there and how we improve that going forward. You know, you can't really address it with this specificity here, but certainly one of the things I've noticed in my career change is that if you're going to go recruit from somebody who has a professional background and you pay them the CTE money they offered me, then you're hiring angels because you essentially took a 70% pay cut to go work in a school. I don't know how you manage that, but when you look at sort of computer science, engineering, nursing, you know, it would be nice if that was on the radar so it doesn't get lost in the mud, if that makes sense. And that's the only thing I would comment on is let's not lose track of that and that work and working that problem. And it's not an easy one by any stretch, which is why I would say you would sort of protect it within the budget to work it over a year or so. Because I think everything's going to get consumed with the pandemic for a while going forward.
Okay.
Thank you, Trustee Walker. Do I see any other hands? Any other board members? President Marks?
I just wanted to say that I agree with Trustee Walker and know that that's a priority in our community and also a priority for our students to have, we'll call it practical knowledge so that they can get jobs either while they're in high school or right after high school. I think it's really helpful to be able to have that access. And so I agree, if we can help make that a priority, it will help our students move forward in their careers. So thank you, especially in this time where it's really difficult for everybody.
You know, something that I want to add just for a second. I don't see a difference between classroom instruction, which is the second priority, and CTE. I see it one and the same. Classroom instruction does encompass English, math, and social science, but it also encompasses the CTE programs that we continue to invest in, and we certainly need to grow first. Analyze it so we can to get a strong district-wide CTE program. So, in just your concern with, is it absent? I think it's absolutely part of the classroom instruction. So I don't see it any different than first high quality. I don't have the list right in front of me. Great instruction the first time, I think, is how it's framed.
Correct.
Yeah, and this is Brad Godot. I just jump in and add on to that, Dr. Noguchi, that the work in the evaluating our CTE programs district-wide is still ongoing. Obviously, we had to hit the pause button in March when COVID hit, but we've already started those discussions about what is the work that we can do this year to continue, because we have to assess what we're doing. You know, is that still meeting the needs of our community and of our local workforce? And then how do we manage our resources to continue that? So it's not going away. There might be some things that look differently in the years to come, but that's the natural evolution of connecting CTE work with your local community.
I think maybe the disconnect is just we haven't gotten to it in the boardroom then.
Yep.
In the sense that since we haven't seen it and we haven't really hashed it out and talked about it, that the concern is that with all the other noise that's going on, and there's a lot of it, it's important, and you have to address you're putting out the fire of the day, that we don't lose track of the downfield goal, which I don't think we do. But keep in mind, I'm in my parting regards here because it's moments away for my successors here, and that was really important to me, is sort of that CTE, computer science, nursing, all those things that, like they've said, can go out and get you a job fairly quickly in this environment. And I think any of our students would benefit from all of that. And maybe it's just a report and a follow-up report, which is good to hear.
I'm going to ask our student representative to actually share a little bit. I think we're talking about what's affecting students, and I'd like to hear from a student on the priorities. Is there anything that's not on this list that you think should be maybe on the list, or priorities that would be important to you?
Nothing additional, but I definitely agree that the CTE program is super important, because I know for my high school in particular, the majority of the student body doesn't actually pursue a 4-year degree at a university. So it's important to have that career training right out of high school so people can get into the job force.
That's awesome. I appreciate that feedback. Thank you. Are there any other trustees who have questions or comments? Seeing none, my only comment.
I had my hand. Can you hear me?
I thought
my hand up.
I thought you just hadn't put it down from last time. President Marks, go ahead.
That's fine, and I know I looked at it, but I just wanted to ask, could we just add it on that line with the grade instruction first time, including, I don't know if you want to do career, college and career readiness. We could just, I don't know if that's what you would call it, but we're talking mostly about career is what the CTE is. So I'm just asking to defer to the board on CTE or college and career, just to add it into that so that it doesn't get lost in the shuffle, since we really haven't had that conversation, and that's why this has come to the board tonight.
Yeah, I
Makes
agree.
sense to me, and Trustee Irvin is agreeing. Do you have anything else to add, Trustee Irvin, or are you just saying I agree?
Yes, I agree. I just need, you know, we should be clear on that as well, career and
Okay. Is
yeah.
that something that we can add to that list then, Mr. Zierli?
Yeah, we can wordsmith this, and then again, like I said, it would come back for approval. We would ask for the board's approval in establishing these recommended budget priorities at the next meeting. But we can come up with something that satisfies the intent of the Board of Trustees for that area.
Thank you. And my only comment would be the social emotional component. Our entire world is struggling with this right now, and I think a lot of people are struggling emotionally with the state of how things are going. And so I think it's important to support not only our students but our staff as well with that social emotional component. But when I look at the list and the priorities, it's a Sophie's choice. How do you knock something else down that's equally important? I just want to make sure that doesn't get lost in there, because I think that's huge.
Dr. West, this is Brad Godot. I'd just like to comment to that,
yes.
We did have that conversation around the importance and the value of the social emotional supports and services for our students. But we did also think that under professional development that we would be able to recapture some of that through training staff, ongoing training of staff to be able to identify and support students in crisis and in need. So I agree with you 100% that it is a terrible dilemma to have to start to prioritize budget expenditures around this, but that it was not taken lightly in that ranking order, and we do keep our eye on the ball when it comes to the social emotional needs of our students and staff.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Mr. Godot. I see Carson, you have another comment or question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. Does social and emotional support services, is that mainly internal college or school counseling, or is that external resources as well?
I'm happy to answer that question, Carson. This is Brad Godot. That includes our academic counselors, as well as any number of different social emotional services that we provide across the district. You might think of the student assistance specialists on our campuses that help provide supports in the intervention centers, as well as in other ways. Mr. Herbst, I don't know if you want to add on to that.
Yeah, it includes the family support specialists we have in a lot of our schools, the student assistance specialists at every school, and then the mental health clinicians that do definitely different than the academic counseling, much more on the social emotional therapeutic side of things. They are also in various locations and deployed throughout the district. So that's what we're talking about.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I just feel like I have to add that our academic counselors, which is our credentialed school counselors, are also trained to do social and emotional counseling as well.
Yes, they are.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? All right. That was a great report and very important. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you for your input.
We're moving on to B6, which is an approval of revisions to Modesto City Schools and Modesto Teachers Association collective bargaining agreement for 2019-2020, and that's Mr. Henderson.
All right, good evening, Board Vice President West and Board President Marks and trustees, Superintendent Noguchi and cabinet members. I'm very pleased to bring forward for you for your consideration the approval of these revisions to the MCS and the Modesto Teachers Association's collective bargaining agreement for 2019-20. As you mentioned, this is the agreement for 2019-20 negotiations year, and it's the culmination of a significant collaborative effort between negotiation teams from both the district and MTA. It represents the work of about over 6 different formal sessions from November all the way through to when we achieved our agreement in late July and signed off in August. And that includes during that time of the unprecedented pandemic. So we paused, yet we worked through reaching an agreement during that time period, as well as the challenges of the budget from the original January budget through the May revision, which was not looking very good, as Associate Superintendent Zierle has mentioned, all the way through what our current situation is with the Budget Act that was actually adopted. What it does not directly reflect is all the additional work in between there of all the MOUs and letters of agreement that we had to reach, and again, more collaborative work. But what it does have is it embeds, similar to those letters of agreement and the work that was put into those, the same focused intent, the compromise, the steadfast commitment that we've had to the process on both sides, and the genuine collaboration that our current and changing conditions required of both of the parties coming together. The articles we negotiated are listed in the articles that are included as your attachment: hours of employment. We tackled evaluation, salary, health and welfare benefits, organizational security and payroll deduction, as well as transfers. Some highlights of the agreement. It includes a 2% one-time off the schedule salary increase, again, based on the 1920 base salary. Continuation of the successful 0.5% professional development opportunity that we launched last year as a district through Dr. Odell and her department. Will continue on through the 2021 school year. There's an increase to the hourly direct instructional program salary schedule, and we really increased our value for substitutes in the district, not just on the salary schedule, increasing their daily rates, but also incentivize and reward active substitutes who work frequently for Modesto City Schools. There's a substantial increase in the district's contribution for health and welfare benefits for employees who sign up to take district medical benefit plans. And this represents a significant shift to take a dramatic step toward addressing the systemic and structural issues as pointed out through the work last year of the Health Benefits Committee. And it's going to better position the district in achieving the goal of being eligible for improved rate estimates for its medical plans ultimately, which is the goal. And part of that is addressing the cash in lieu waiver process and practice that we've had. As part of the agreement, the district will fund a life insurance benefit for all certificated employees. And we put some language in here as we anticipate Education Code 46148 coming up. That's the earlier start time language. Just to acknowledge ahead of time when that comes through that we're gonna work to be compliant with that. We were able to reach agreement on some language related to how we deliver trainings and provide some flexibility for doing so. And probably some of the most in-depth work had to do with changes to and improvements in the evaluation article. I think that was some of the most in-depth conversations on how we can strike a balance between streamlining the process, making it user-friendly, and allowing for productive and meaningful feedback for employees, so that it's beneficial not just for the employee receiving the evaluation, but also the manager who has to do many of them and try and make a tool that works for both parties. We also created a certificate evaluation process committee because that work's not done for the non-instructional employees. We got through instructional and made a lot of changes, but non-instructional employees that were mentioned earlier, some of them counselors, psychologists, nurses, some of those, we want to really have a committee do some deep work on that. And finally, we cleaned up language to reflect the district's expansion of the full day kinder, as well as transfer article language. We think ultimately that will support students in the classrooms and be less disruptive at schools that are experiencing displacement because of overstaffing due to transferring or shifting and declining enrollment. That was a lot, but in short, we tackled some difficult issues. We met our areas of disagreement head on. I can't say enough about the collaborative spirit of both of the parties and the teams that represented them. While we were confronted with challenges along the way, everyone involved maintained focus on the right work and approached the task at hand in the most professional manner possible. And I think they would agree the relationships, our contract, and our district as a whole will be better off as a result. So for these reasons and more, as stated in the recommendation in accordance with Government Code, Section 3547.5, and following consideration of certification that the costs incurred by the district can be met during the agreement's term, it is recommended that the board approve the revisions to the MCS and Modesto Teachers Association's collective bargaining agreement for the 2019-20 school year. Thank you for indulging my speech and trying to highlight some of the main points of this agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. Ms. Noonan, do we have any comments from the public?
Yes, we do. So let me read the comment. This comment was submitted by Chief Negotiator of Modesto Teachers Association, Chris Peterson. And Chris's quote is, "We obviously urge ratification. We used fiscally sound measures to reach agreement, including a 2% one-time off the salary schedule payment. This is not a long-term financial commitment, and it's from the 2019-2020 school year, where Modesto City Schools already moved millions into reserves before COVID cuts and discretionary spending created additional savings. We also finally addressed a major concern with health and welfare. We thank the Insurance Committee's hard work to investigate our status and concerns. MCS is currently in the lowest quintile in Stanislaus County for contributions for healthcare. Our change in monthly contributions will significantly change that status. We know we have work to do moving forward. The first step is to ratify this agreement." And that's the end of this comment. And that's the only comment that was received.
Thank you. And now we're going to questions or comments from the board. I saw Trustee Brown's hand up.
Show the mute still on.
I see you as muted still, Trustee Brown.
There we go.
Oh, there we go.
Sorry about that delay. So I just want to commend all parties working together, as you mentioned, Mr. Henderson, through probably the most difficult set of circumstances we could ever imagine, even beyond what we could imagine. And thank all parties for the collaboration. We've made some really significant changes that will move the district forward, and I am going to support this document and these changes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. President Marks?
Yes, I just want to thank the staff and especially the Teachers Union for all of the hard work you did together and the relationships that are built. I believe this year, just going into this year, how things have changed has significantly affected this negotiation, we'll call it season. It always seems like a season to me, but I just appreciate all that went into this and just how we can work together. It's awesome. So thank you to all the parties involved. Thank you, Mr. Peterson, for your great comment too. And I appreciate your honesty and how you present yourself in all areas. So thank you so much. And I too will support this. And I can't say that every year I've done that. So, so thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking for other hands. President Marks' hand came up again. Trustee Walker?
I think I echo Mr. Henderson's comments and certainly what President Marks said, and I'll support this. I've supported every labor bargaining agreement we've had since I've been here, and I think that's sort of the point of my comment, is to reflect back to 5 years ago. We weren't even on basically hardly speaking terms at that point. I think the comment they made when I walked into the boardroom in December, when they were in the middle of negotiations that had been delayed, was, "You're going to get baptized by fire and brimstone and stones." I mean, we were meeting in the Grigori gym with overflow crowds, with teachers in green shirts, and the animosity was at a level that was just off the charts. And I think that just goes to show how much progress has been made, not just this year, but in previous years and other negotiation years. We're in such a different place than we were 4 or 5 years ago, that you can sit down and have a conversation and sit at a table and find a middle ground and not essentially throw bricks, which is what was going on back 4 or 5 years ago, and meeting in high school gyms in the biggest high school in our district. And I think that just speaks volumes to relationships, honesty, realizing what you can and can't do. And I think that's just sort of my 5-year reflection on this, is that was some of the most heated conversations and difficult board meetings I've ever been in. And it started on day one. And it just continued, but that's not the case anymore. And there's trust, and there's the ability to sit down and have an honest conversation. And I think moving the healthcare benefits, as Mr. Peterson mentioned, is a really big deal. Certainly something we've all talked about off and on at different points. And I think everybody will be better off for it. I think the union's understanding on the one-time money makes a lot of sense, because we don't know what the future holds. But that also goes back to the trust issue of, do we trust each other to bargain faithfully again the next time around? And I think that's part of what's been put in place by Mr. Henderson and Mr. Zierle and other members of the team, and Mr. Munoz, over many years. And I think that we now see the benefit of that in a difficult situation. And I am much happier with the current version than the version 5 years ago that I got introduced to. Well done, everybody.
Thank you. Do we have other hands? Seeing none, I'd like to also echo my support for this. I think we all appreciate what the teachers do for our students. Now more than ever, we're asking so much of our educators, and I appreciate the hard work, and it's nice to be able to come together and collaborate with something that we think is fair, but something that shows that we certainly admire and respect the work that our teachers do as professionals. So we're going to go ahead and take a roll call for this. I am looking for a motion to approve the collective bargaining agreement for 2019-2020. I see Trustee Brown and a second from Trustee Lopez. So we are going to go ahead. Please say aye or nay. Trustee Lopez?
Aye.
Trustee Brown?
Aye.
Trustee Walker?
Aye.
Trustee Irvin?
Aye.
President Marks?
Aye.
Student Representative Caron? No, I kind of thought his name's on here, sorry. And myself is an aye. And so this revision passes. It's approved. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we're moving on to B7, which is an approval of letter of agreement between Modesto City School District and Modesto City Schools managers for the 2019-2020 school year. And Mr. Henderson, this is you again.
It is. Thank you. It's a pleasure to bring forward for your consideration and approval this letter of agreement with the district and its managers. As we were continuing negotiations with MTA, as described in the previous item, the district consulted with MCS managers. It's led by Nathan Shar as the president and Angela Zioli, the vice president, regarding agreement on a compensation package for all management employees, again for the 2019-20 school year. Highlights from the agreement include basically mirroring some of the same agreements with the previous tentative agreement, or the one that you just approved, but 2% one-time off the schedule salary payment for 1920. Also for managers, continuing the professional development, the 0.5% professional development opportunity. The same increase, a significant increase toward the district contribution for health and welfare, which equally is a huge move for our managers, as it was certificated. And an agreement, as part of the agreement, the district will fund a provision of life insurance and a disability benefit for all management employees. So just let me take a moment similarly to acknowledge the work of our managers under normal circumstances, but particularly over the past months since the onset of the pandemic and resulting school closures. Like other employees, they've had to be flexible and convey confidence and provide leadership for their respective school sites and departments during the unprecedented times, during much of which the answers to questions were unclear at best and simply didn't exist at worst. As teachers and other staff have had to be with students or parents and one another, managers have also had to be patient, reassuring, and serve the dual role of supervisor and counselor to those in their charge and to one another. So, there's no doubt that these have been among, if not the most challenging times in their careers. And as a group, we couldn't be more proud of the leadership by our management team in Modesto City Schools. So thanks for letting me take that aside, but for the same recommendation in accordance with that government code 3547.5, and following consideration of certification of the costs incurred by the district can be met during the terms agreement, the agreement's term, it's recommended the board approve the letter of agreement between the district and managers for the 1920 school year.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson. Ms. Noonan, do we have any comments from the public on this item?
No, there are no comments on this item.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the school board? Looking for hands. I don't see any hands. So I'm looking for a motion to approve this letter of agreement between Modesto City School District and Modesto City School Managers for 2019-2020 school year. Sorry.
I'll make a motion, but
Irvin?
it looks like Mr. Irvin has
We
his
have
hand
Mr.
raised.
Irvin and then a second by President Marks.
Yes.
And
Thank
so
you.
we're going to do the roll call for this one. Trustee Brown. I can hear you. Trustee Irvin.
Aye.
Trustee Lopez.
Aye.
President Marks.
Aye.
Trustee Walker.
Aye.
And myself is an aye. It is unanimous and it passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all.
We are down to items to be placed on future board agenda. Do I have anyone wishing to comment or add an item? Trustee Walker.
Okay, so this is a request for a few minutes at the next meeting. As I've been trying for months to sort of get myself retired and start a business opportunity, by the close of this business week, I will have submitted my letter of resignation to Dr. Noguchi and President Marks effective September 9th, which will allow me one more board meeting with my colleagues before I move on to other adventures. And I can't tell you how pleased I am with where we're at from where we started. You guys are fantastic to work with, and it's sort of time to go on to new adventures. But I am greatly appreciative for the time I've spent with you and honored to serve this community.
Thank you, Trustee Walker, and we will be hopefully place this on the next agenda for you to have a few minutes to speak. Thank you. I am now looking for a motion to close the meeting. Trustee Brown and seconded by, I got to look around the room. Okay, President Marks, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you for meeting in person. That was great.
Thank you.
To see you even